All right, welcome back. This is Sunday edition. My guests are already here with me. Dismas Mokua, political risk analyst, Hesbon Owila on my left, on my right, Jubilee Party strategist Mutinda Kavemba, and Professor Oeri Tumbo, governance expert, is back with us. He has been trying to run away from this kikao, but he's back. Karibu, welcome back, Prof.
Thank you.
All right, gentlemen, let's take a look at what's happening. What the political pages are saying, that is the Sunday Standard and the Daily Nation. And the splash on the Sunday Standard, the big story, the headline is fears of secret polling stations surface. The National Super Alliance claiming that there are secret polling stations that are yet to be declared. The IEBC has said that NASA's fears are unfounded, as it has put in place mechanisms to ensure that there is a free and fair election on the 8th of August. That story continues in detail on page 5 of the Sunday Standard. Dismas, NASA seems to be coming up with new fears every other few days. What is your take on this?
Well, I think NASA is justified, and indeed every other Kenyan is justified, that if you smell a rat around IBC, you must come out today and make noise about it. For one reason, that we don't want, after elections August 8th, for the country to degenerate into violence, and then people say that we knew there was something wrong at IBC. And it's the responsibility of IBC to come up and give very good answers so as to allay the fears of any Kenyan.
All right.
And you know, we've said times above number that IBC is supposed to come up with predictable systems for unpredictable outcomes so that every Kenyan is happy and is convinced that, in fact, IBC is doing the right thing. Like you recall a few weeks ago, the IBC suspended their ICT director and another gentleman called Mr. Aura.
Yes.
And in a very, strange turn of events, the two gentlemen are back all of a sudden. They're back at the workplace, and the commissioners had told them to go home. So people are beginning to wonder, especially insiders at IBC, are beginning to wonder, who is actually running IBC? Is it the commissioners who made a recommendation that a number of senior managers and officers go on compulsory leave till they clean the house, or there are some external forces? And I think those are the external forces that NASA, or indeed any other person, the observers who are coming to Kenya, they need to bring out those issues. Because nobody wants to see violence in Kenya. You want to go and have an election so that if President Kenyatta wins, we know it was a fair win. If Raila Odinga wins, we know it was a fair win. And I think it's important for the commissioners really to come out in the open and tell us whose interest do these suspended officers who've now come back to office represent and serve. Right. Because Kenyans, all we want to do is to be assured, beyond doubt, that we have those predictable systems for unpredictable outcomes. Anything outside that, somebody would be justified to go to court every single day till elections.
Hesbon, the IBC has been accused of, they did post online the number of registered voters after that audit of the voter register, but they did not post the list of the polling stations alongside those of the registered voters as required by law.
I think just like Dismas is saying, I mean, there's a sense in which IBC needs to up its game in terms of being as open as possible, in terms of allowing the public to know what they are doing and what they are likely to do, in the sense that it needs to be predictable. Well, the law provides that they need to give a list and a list of the polling station. And I think the fears by NASA are actually, real fears that needs to be explained, for the simple reason that if there is a technicality that IBC does not meet and is required by the law, then it is only fair that it is addressed right now. And I think that is something that IBC cannot run away from, the list, especially now that we have this controversy of some polling stations that are kind of private or hidden somewhere. I think it's incumbent upon IBC to come out clearly and explain, and of course the political class to corroborate the information that IBC is giving, because I want to believe that each and every polling station has an interested political participant, who can actually say that, yeah, indeed, this is a polling station in where I'm contesting and stuff like that. But I think there is a sense in which you also need to look at it broadly, because it is important that you allay all the fears before the election, so much so that after the election, there is nothing that you can say that, we knew this and we didn't say. But there's also a fine line between doing that and precipitating, a situation where you'll dispute the election.
All right.
And I think NASA also needs to be careful about that everything that they raise, it needs to be above board. And I think in this case, they're even quoting the Constitution.
All right. Mutinda, is it possible for IEBC to have secret polling stations?
You know, what I know is that the law is very clear that these polling stations ought to be gazetted. And I believe strongly so that the IEBC is in the process of doing that. But, you know, we are in a competition. Right. And clearly, from the aspersions that have been cast previously, and including this one, I think someone is also being clever about trying to question the credibility of IEBC by also preempting them. Because I believe those who are raising these issues are certain that these things are going to be gazetted. But they would want it to look like it is them who prompted that. That like IEBC actually had some other intention, but because they raised it, then they had to move in and do it. But honestly, that is just politicking. The truth of the matter, and I know they know that, is that all polling stations have to be gazetted prior to the election so that all Kenyans know where they're going to cast their votes. And it's not going to be about guesswork. You know, it reminds me of the days when the election date used to be a secret weapon of the incumbent. Right. It is almost the same case. These things nowadays have by law, they have to be very open. So we all have to know. They've actually said that they have 40,800 polling stations. The next thing is to now gazette them so that we know each and every of the 40,800 polling stations where they are. And right. I think that is going to happen. What I think NASA is trying to do is to continue casting aspersions and creating a conducive environment for them to question whatever result that will eventually come out. It's been a party, and that is in the very likely event that they lose.
All right.
Yes.
Prof, what is your take on this latest NASA claim?
Thanks, Ben. It's nice to be back. Now, I want to take this discussion a step back. Mm-hmm. It is traditional in this country that the party in power holds the state machinery instruments captive. In other words, you look at all over, the ruling party at a particular time basically converts state instruments into private instruments. They do whatever they want with it. In this particular situation, if you look very carefully, through previous elections, through observations of what has happened in previous elections, there's been every effort by the incumbent, all right, to manipulate and encapsulate the activities of IEBC to be, to some extent, similar to the desires and whims of the incumbent, such that anytime IEBC attempts to do what the law requires, these guys are operating underneath all the time. Mm-hmm. For example, it is now common knowledge that what was purported to have been the IEBC appealing the decision about, announcing results, mm-hmm. that did not come from IEBC. It came from elsewhere, and it was basically IEBC was apparently coerced into owning it. And this, on another forum, can be substantiated. Two, when it comes to what you're talking about, the polling stations, mm-hmm. NASA has tended to mix essential issues with non-essential issues. There are those issues that they should raise, mm-hmm. and they are fundamental to getting it right. And there are some they raise sometimes like a knee-jerk reaction, and you wait for follow-up, it never comes. Okay. And I think
this is one of those.
Now, for example, if you say now they are polling fake polling stations, mm-hmm. all right? You should have said, we are aware that there is one here, one there, another there. It was just a general statement. Now, one can decide to ignore it, or IEBC can decide to ignore it, and as a way of compelling them to substantiate the claim.
All right. So do you think they're just bluffing?
I think they may or may not be bluffing, mm-hmm. because you see, as I said, they have not been able, to to isolate trivia from essentials.
From the real
so
thing.
this has created
All
this
right.
thing you call cry wolf. You might cry wolf when the wolf is actually there. Then you will be eaten.
But I think the pertinent issue here is to ask ourselves, these commissioners at IBC, whose interests are they representing? Are they representing the interests of the voters, who is their primary client, to ensure that the election is free, fair, and credible? Or there are some other special interest groups that they are presenting? Have they become members of cartels? Because you recall, when they took office, they made some decisions which everybody was very happy with. The decisions were very invigorating, they were very refreshing. And with the passage of time, they're going back to the old ways. And we must make noise at all times, whether or not you're making noise which is very valid or whether you've just smelt a right. Because if there's suspicion, you must make noise. Kenya is a very strange country, that everything is anchored in our electoral process, where people die, where you lose property. So we cannot afford to play around with IBC. And that's why you must give a pat on the back to the Court of Appeal judges, as well as the High Court, for taking very firm decisions. And even if people suspect that maybe NASA is raising issues which are not very valid, it's incumbent on IBC to come out and tell us that NASA has been raising issues. Out of 10 issues, 8 make sense, and 2 are a waste of time.
All right.
So that to give us confidence.
So you shouldn't lose sight of the essential. All right. That story is on page 9 of the Sunday Standard. Let's go to something else very quickly. On page 9 of, that was on page 5, on page 9 of the Sunday Standard, a story about the county of Siaya, where the IBC has banned political campaigns for a week because of some chaos and violence witnessed in Rarieda sub-county during a NASA rally. And Governor Kano Rasanga and the Rarieda MP who's challenging Rasanga for the Siaya governorship are now complaining that they shouldn't all be, punished because of a few individuals. What do you think about that, Hezbon?
I think punishment is imperative, because I think our political campaigns are becoming a lot more violent, and people are, some losing their lives, injuries that are unnecessary, and I think IBC should actually come out and met that on politicians. And if there is any politician who does not agree with such punishments, especially banning of campaigns, I mean, it's upon that politician to control their supporters, and to the extent that you have violence in a certain area because of contesting candidates, you'd understand that they both have an equal chance. So why would you lose the opportunity to campaign because you have a few disgruntled, fans or supporters? So you'd rather deal with the supporters than complain about what IBC is doing. Because if IBC does nothing, and you see, this violence was condemned from everywhere, because when you don't deal with violence in one particular region, it becomes a threat to other regions. You saw it happened in Siaya. The other day it happened in my home county of Migori. And again, it's the issue of independent candidates versus, the popular candidates within the popular parties. And I think if these parties and coalitions cannot deal with it, IBC has to come in and deal with it.
Dismas?
Well,
The blanket ban, is it the most effective?
Well, it brings to question the role of independent candidates. Like, for instance, the incidents we are discussing of Rarieda, Raila Odinga had gone on a campaign. And the allegations that Gumbo supporters were in that meeting, but as soon as Raila said that he needs 6-piece voting, then there was violence erupted. So one begins to wonder, should independents actually attend meetings which have been been put together by political parties, or they should keep a distance and have their own meeting? Because the understanding is that Mr. Raila Odinga went for an ODM meeting. He did not go for a meeting with independents. So if Gumbo's supporters were unhappy with the statements made by Mr. Raila Odinga, they would have elected to get another avenue or another opportunity to make noise. So the independent candidates need to take a decision that either you want to support your political party to the hilt, or you want to be by the sideline. Because again, the very definition of an independent an independent candidate would actually suggest that you are not supporting any other political party or any other presidential candidate. But if you think you need to support, say, Raila Odinga or Kenyatta, you can actually go ahead without causing violence. And in my view, IBC should have done investigations and find the person who occasioned that violence, and that's the person who is supposed to be punished instead of having a blanket condemnation. Because for some of the reporters who attended that event said, the moment Raila Odinga mentioned six-piece, then people came out with rungus, batons, and it seems like it was some sort of precision that everybody had planned, that as soon as we hear six-piece, then occasion a bit of violence. So instead of IBC banning, campaigning during the entire period in Siaya, they need to go look for the specifics. It needs to be very surgical. Because there are some people who want to go on with their business campaigning, say James Orengo. Probably now he doesn't have a chance to campaign because of mischief by two persons.
All right.
Ben, I think maybe if I may just add, when Raila went to Migori, the Sukuria part of Migori, and traversed the entire Luo part of Migori County, I think you look at the sentiments that come from the violence that was witnessed, and you actually agree with the blanket ban, and of course call on IBC now to investigate and actually punish. Because at the end of the day, not everyone attends a political rally, but almost everyone will be caught up in the violence. So you have people from the village who are going about their business caught up in a violent situation that they had nothing to do with. So once you ban, it means that you are even protecting, other supporters from that kind of violence as you investigate. But it is incumbent upon IBC to deal with some of these guys and even, stop them from campaigning.
All right. What do you think should happen, Mutinda?
First, the law is very clear. There are issues that this man is raising that are very clear in law.
Yes.
It is black and white. You should not attend anybody's. If you're an independent and we have an ODM rally, you should not by law attend. That is interference. Those things are not gray areas. The law is very, very explicit on that. You should actually not do anything to undermine anybody's else political activity. So on that
attending or undermining, because
even attending, because
a friendly,
let me just remind you something. Someone the other day was fined. An independent candidate was fined for having a poster, a portrait of a NASA presidential candidate on his poster. That is enough to tell you what this is all about.
All right.
Just a poster that I am an independent, but I have some party candidate there. That is by law not allowed. Otherwise, why did you go independent if you still want to align with parties? So that is a very straightforward matter that people should be let to do their thing. That is the first thing. Then secondly, this thing reminds me of, I grew up in Eastlands, and those days, in case something bad happened to a policeman in your neighborhood, you were all advised, especially young men, you were all advised not to be there, whether you were involved or not. Do you know why? Because when the police came now to see what happened, there was no issue of who was involved or who was not involved. That is exactly what IBC is doing here. And that is not really how do you collective punishment? Even the MCAs who had nothing to do with it, people from even other parties who had nothing to do with this,
but
I don't think that is the way to go. The issue is to establish.
Maybe it's the only language that the politicians, all of them...
That one doesn't affect the people who are guilty. They actually escape. When you do it that way, the people who are the beneficiaries are those who are guilty. The ones who are victims, and they are the majority, are those who are innocent. Right. This thing was not planned by all aspirants in that area. There must have been one or two of them. So what is so difficult with establishing who are behind it and holding them accountable? I think this is the wrong way to do things, because there has to be a way of establishing where the responsibility
what really happened.
Yes.
Actually, Ben, there are two things I would like to bring out. One, where are the police? I thought the police would have immediately advised IBC who are the parties that were involved. Because if this happened and it was a political rally and the police are there to ensure, there is law and order, how come the police from that area have not been able to provide information that would facilitate proper decision-making to avoid blanket punitive action? So this is a classic case of how the police, while pretending all along that they are neutral, you can see if it is in that backyard, they don't see that evil. They are not there. But trust me, if it had happened in Kibera, they would be there in their thousands, because that is a 50-50 zone.
All right.
Two, there is this incident, then, is a product of what I like to call NASA A and NASA B. Jubilee A and Jubilee B. The people who got the tickets are the A. Now, these people pretending to be independent they are not independent at all in thought and deed. They are not independent. They are basically the B faction sitting in the veranda waiting for an opportunity to utilize the benefits of A.
All right.
So the B is not willing.
All right. Speaking of A and B, let's go to the next story. And it is about that A and B. And it is some of these candidates who did not get the political party certificates in the nominations and decided to run for those positions as independent candidates. And that story is on the Sunday Review by Sunday Nation on page 17 of the Sunday Nation. Uhuru Raila race against time to stop sibling rivalry, quote unquote, in strongholds. Of course, this is a story we have been talking about for the last few months, what is going to happen. We saw what happened in Uasin Gishu when William Ruto tried to tell Bundotich Zedekiah Kiprop Buzeki to step down in favor of Mandago. There are a number of these for both Jubilee and NASA. We have the most glaring ones. There's another case in Homa Bay County, Oyugi Magwanga, and being told to step down for Cyprian Oiti. There's one, of course, in Bungoma as well, where Wangamati from Ford Kenya and Alfred Hangati, ODM, are said could divide the NASA vote in that place where it is perceived to be a NASA stronghold. In the county of Narok as well, Joseph Musuni, Tiampatu Musuni, who is the ODM candidate, as well as Patrick Olentutu, who is the CCM candidate. What gives here? Let me start with you, Prof. What gives here in this candidate A and candidate B for both independent candidates and other parties which are friendly to either NASA or Jubilee, but are set to, if both of them run, are set to divide the vote according to the parties? What should happen?
Since the party chiefs have been unable to reconcile, if you look at Jubilee, it's the same. You look at NASA, it's the same. The party chiefs have been largely unable to reconcile the two parties. And right now, each of those individuals is chasing their own cake, all right? They are not too bothered about what the party chief is saying. Everybody is chasing an opportunity. Now, what has evolved is that those positions have become so juicy that nobody is willing to forego that opportunity to take that seat. So the consequences are going to be, and they're going to hurt, in my view, NASA much more than Jubilee. Because in those areas, in the NASA areas, there is also the element of intra-ethnic conflict and inter-ethnic conflict. Whereas largely in the Jubilee area, it is intra-ethnic conflict. Now, secondly, in the NASA area, the party leaders have nothing to offer the guys they are persuading to stay. They are simply saying, tutaona, but allow us to proceed.
Whereas that is NASA.
Yeah? NASA,
is
yes, NASA.
And they're promising some plum jobs if they win the election.
You see, they are promising, but they don't have them. You see, a promise in political terms is an opportunity to cross a bridge. It's not anything considered a deliverable.
Does Jubilee have those positions? Because they're both going into an election.
Let me tell you something. Because Jubilee has power, it is easy to create a mirage that we are there, and as you expect, we will do everything possible to make sure we keep this thing so that you can have the jobs. Do not, you see, the two sides have these positions. Jubilee has this position that it doesn't matter what the rules are. The end justifies the means, all right? NASA has this problem that do you have capacity to translate what you're promising into reality, all right? So it is this conflict that has created instability within parties and within communities.
All right, Mutinda, your party, how is it going to deal with this? Of course, as Prof says, I don't know if these gentlemen agree that this is affecting NASA more than it is Jubilee, but you still have Uasin Gishu to deal with, Meru, where Kiraitu Murungi, and of course the incoming, and Kirinyaga as well, where the president refused to lift the hand of anyone. Embu as well, Nyeri, where there's DP and PNU and Jubilee. What is your party going to do about this?
Now, I think the truth of the matter is that there are challenges in both camps, but in the Jubilee camp, the challenges can be handled much better than in the NASA side. Why am I saying this? Because first, Jubilee is one party, and they were very clear from the word go, and that's why they actually brought 12 parties together to form one party, that they are going to go as one party. There are a few areas where there are issues of friendly parties, but most of them do not have any formal arrangement, unlike the 5 partner parties in NASA that have actually signed documents. Right. Some of these other parties just took upon themselves to endorse the president and work with them, but they were not going to be Jubilee. Like the NASA case, they are not part of the Jubilee coalition. They're just friendly parties. So I think for Jubilee, it is going to depend on where exactly are we. Like for instance, in Nairobi, the Jubilee have to come out very clearly and state that they are with their party candidates. Why are they doing that? Because if they don't, then their chances of winning are going to be drastically reduced. It is just the truth of the matter, that the competition in Nairobi is such that it's almost 50-50.
Right.
So there is no room, but there are areas where, like for instance, in
Aren't you afraid that Peter Kenneth supporters and enthusiasts might revolt against Jubilee?
But that's what I'm trying to tell you, that in Nairobi we've got no option. We have to be very clear that in Nairobi we are supporting our Jubilee candidates. There is nothing like a Jubilee-affiliated independent. Independents are independents, and by law, for that matter. Actually, they are not even allowed in law to associate openly with any of the sides.
Right.
So in Nairobi, for instance, it is going to be very clear from the Jubilee leadership, and I think the last time they toured Nairobi, that it was as clear as that. And there are regions where they might, like for instance, you saw what the president did in Kirinyaga, like you've correctly stated. He decided not to lift the hand of anyone. Why? Because that is a predominantly Jubilee area, and both of them are supporting his presidency. So it will not do any damage to the chances of an hostile person getting, there is no possibility of an hostile person getting elected there. But in places like Nairobi, there is a possibility that if we decide not to be very clear on who we support, then NASA will be the beneficiary. So I think it is going to be about that. But you see, for NASA, you've mentioned a very good example. And it cost them last time. Because I've mentioned here previously that the truth of the matter is that in the last election, Raila won the presidential vote in more constituencies than Jubilee. That is the truth of the matter. Then you ask yourself, then how did they end up with a minority in parliament? And that's what I want to explain. They had internal competition. In Nairobi here, there are 2 seats they'd lost because of that. ODM as a candidate, Wiper as a candidate, the TNA person wins. But if you look at the NASA, the court vote then, they had the numbers. In Bungoma, they are going to repeat the same. If you look at the women rep in Bungoma, Newford, Kenya, if you look at Trans Nzoia, Newford, Kenya, go back and see what happened. It is because Ford Kenya had a women rep as candidate and ODM had a women rep candidate. So that is going to affect them more than it is going to affect Jubilee.
All right. You think Jubilee is going to Peter Katikati in Bungoma?
Yeah, of course, like Newford, Kenya. That is how. That is how. Although the truth of the matter is, again, is this: that even if you combine the Ford Kenya number of votes that the ODM candidate got, in short, Lusaka had more than 50% plus one. So even for Lusaka, it's a different case. I think he was just a popular candidate. But for the women rep, it is very, very clear that if they had gone together, and you have 45 such constituencies in the country. I've just given you a few examples. There are 45 such constituencies where Raila won the presidency, but because of the competition between
internal competition,
Wiper, Ford Kenya, and ODM, he lost the
Hesbon, obviously it is clear who is facing more of a challenge, but how do Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta, the leaders of the 2 main parties or coalitions in this election, what is the best way for them to deal with this?
I think the best way is to assess the situation. Just like, Uhuru goes to Kirinyaga, it doesn't lift anyone's hand because it doesn't matter who wins, the votes are already in the bag. they need to assess the situation and look at the volatile counties where they need to have their governors, they need to have their representatives, Senate and parliamentary, and just prevail upon, the competing candidates. You talk about Bungoma, that is where NASA has to rein in, because if they don't, chances of losing are very high. You talk about Meru, Uasin Gishu, Uhuru has to make a decision because it doesn't look really good because Munya wins in Meru. I don't think it's going to be interesting for Jubilee. Buzeki wins in Uasin Gishu. It's not going to be interesting. And as it is right now, I don't think Jubilee can easily tell who's going to win. And I agree with Prof and my friend here that I think NASA sits uncomfortably in this situation for the simple reason that you look at the swing counties, you have a feel that it's going to Jubilee for the simple reason that Wiper, Chama cha Mashinani, like in Narok, it's a bit obvious that if they don't sort their house, Tunai would win. One, it's easy for Jubilee to prevail upon their candidates to step down with the promise of a job because there's that perception. And then secondly, there's that cloud of an incumbent. And in most of these volatile counties, you realize that Jubilee has that. You go to Uasin Gishu, the incumbent is a Jubilee candidate. You go to Narok, the incumbent is a Jubilee candidate. So it gives Jubilee some kind of an edge. But having said that, I think the two leading presidential candidates have to sit down and assess this situation because it could be the biggest issue for them.
This affects the parliamentary seats, the senatorial, the number of governors each party or coalition has. But how does this affect the presidential tally at the end of the day?
Ben, the reason why we have those independents in Kenya, it's not a fault of their own. It's because these two leaders we are talking about, Raila Odinga and President Kenyatta, did not go the extra mile to ensure that the party primaries were free, fair, and credible, as they expect from IBC. So, for instance, if you go to Kiambu, you cannot blame Governor Kavogo for running as an independent. If you go to Nairobi, you can't blame Peter Ken for running as an independent because they say the elections were not free and fair. So they're carrying the burden of being independents because these two leaders failed to ensure that the elections were credible. But be that as it may, we are going for 6 elections on one day. And Raila Odinga and President Kenyatta need to take a decision as to whether they're interested in winning the presidential seats or having majority governors, having majority Senate, National Assembly, and MCS. What should work for them is to take a decision that their primary objective is to win the presidential ticket. And for the rest of the seats, let them leave the independents, what a professor refers to as A and B, let them fight themselves out. Then at the end of the day, if, say, for instance, Raila wins, as he expects to do, when he goes to the National Assembly and the Senate and he's got a minority in the 2 houses, then he can go and cut deals. Because if you start now antagonizing anybody, like, for instance, what happened in Rarieda, if you antagonize Isaac Gumbo and Isaac decides that I'm not going to run, then it's going to compromise the number of votes you're going to have.
All right. Something I would want to say about something else.
We have to put this to an end. But yes, 30 seconds.
Yeah, the reason, you see, there is the reason and there is the excuse. There is the reason and there is the excuse. The biggest excuse that has been given by those people who went independent after losing the nominations, excuse is that they were not free and fair. Of course, some of them, it is a justified reason. But the truth of the matter is that a majority of them, it is just the culture of Kenyans not accepting electoral defeat. Because how do you explain a number 6 in a nomination going independent and purporting that they are doing that because they
lost unfairly?
You know, as in some of these things. And if you look at the numbers of independents and you look at the positions they were in the nominations, then it now becomes more of an excuse other than the reason.
No, most of the independents were actually number 2, or others did not participate.
No. I can give you figures in Aurora here.
All right.
Yes,
I want the rules to comment. One of the major complicating factors of this whole process is that NASA has got a Pentagon which appears to exist nominally because these are the things it should be solving. Like if there are people on a Wiper ticket, on a money ticket, ODM in one place, these are the issues they should be talking about with a view to resolving so that they can say, for the benefit of the presidential candidate, let us do it like this, and they call them in and discuss. Now, the issue is different in Jubilee. In the Jubilee, although they appear like they are one party, the DP is chasing a 2022 agenda, whereas Uhuru is chasing now. Now, when it goes sour, the DP turns around and says, no, it wasn't the 2022 agenda, it is Uhuru now. So the problems that are inside these parties in terms of chasing vested interests are the ones that have made the situation fairly complicated to resolve.
All right, let's leave it there in terms of the Sunday, the political pages on the Sunday newspapers. You can get those stories and the analysis and details from the Sunday Standard. That is, of course, Kenya's bold newspaper. We'll take a quick commercial break here on Sunday edition. When we return, we shall be taking a look, analyzing the political party manifestos that were launched last week by both the NASA coalition and Jubilee. Don't go too far.